Hi, my name is Bausinger, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about differentiation and specifically the Tomlinson model of differentiation. The overall idea behind the Tomlinson model is that all learners are different and that it is our job as educators to respond to their very different needs and learning styles and to accommodate them in our classrooms in order to make them successful learners. So, the Tomlinson model is a tiered model, and at the very top we're thinking about differentiation as an overall concept and how we can differentiate things within our classrooms to make it work for our learners. And as we work down the model, we're thinking about responding to those learners' needs. And prior to being able to respond to those learners' needs, there's some things that we need to consider. So one of the first things that we can consider is the student's learning profile. And the idea behind a learning profile is essentially it's a collection of information about your student. So if you're thinking of a specific student, you would be thinking of things like what kind of learner are they? Are they auditory? Are they visual? What kind of typical everyday learning needs do they use and what are their preferences? As well as their cultural background, maybe their socioeconomic status, their gender, anything that would affect the way that they learn and process information would be a part of their learning profile. Another thing that's important to consider is also your students' interests. And we all know that when we're more interested in something, we tend to be more engaged and buy more into the concept or idea. So the same goes for our students. So some things to consider when it comes to interest are personal interests as well as their interests at school. And we can use those interests to build more meaningful lessons that are going to make them interested and excited and engaged as learners, and to make things more fun and our classroom more enjoyable as well. So another thing that you're going to want to consider is readiness. And readiness refers to how ready our students are to learn about a particular concept. So readiness will vary for all of your students in your classroom. And some students may already have a lot of prior background knowledge about a certain subject, while other students might come into a concept with little to no knowledge. So in order to know what their readiness is, it's really important to use tools like pre-assessment and also just having conversation with your student and kind of gauging where are they at, what are they ready to learn right now. And their readiness level basically suggests here's where I should start with this particular student. And again, this is going to differ vastly between different students within your classroom. So once we look at those three different elements together, the learning profile as well as the readiness and then build in student interest, that's when we start thinking about how am I going to teach my students what I actually want them to know while considering all the things that are important and meaningful to them as learners. And the three different things that we need to consider when doing that, we first want to think about the actual content. So the content is what do I want my students to know, the stuff that they're going to learn. And that stuff can come in many different forms. You want to think about providing maybe different texts for your students to meet their differentiated needs. You can also use different types of media and videos to meet their needs. Some things are going to maybe be more complex, and then maybe some of it's going to be a little bit more basic. And the content is just basically what do I want them to know? What are we going to learn? And some different forms for delivering that. Okay. Then next you want to think about the process, and the process is how are my kids going to take this information and really understand it? And the process can look like a lot of different things. Some examples of how you could differentiate that process would be having hands-on centers where students are rotating around and they're working through problems and they're thinking about things in different ways at each center. Some of your instruction might need to be direct, and your students may need to take in some of that information by just sitting and listening and receiving that direct instruction. For some of your kids, maybe they'll keep a learning log and they'll be responsible for some of their own learning. And that's absolutely acceptable, and each of your students is going to be different. So for some kids that might not work, and for other kids it may. Providing tiered assignments is really important, which means some of your kids might need a lower level assignment where they're using some of that lower level content to learn, and some of your kids can maybe work with an on level text and have that tiered instruction, and others maybe are above grade level and they already know a lot of the information, and in your pre-assessment you learn that might not need to learn some of the other things in their processing. And then finally, when you are finished delivering your content through different means of process, you are going to ask your students to provide you with a product. And that product can look extremely different for each student. Some kids might work really well by providing you with some type of project. Maybe they're going to create a model of what you've been learning about. Maybe some kids can reiterate their thinking better by writing a paper. Maybe some students do need those direct multiple choice kind of question and answer assessments. So for each student, what they're going to provide you for the product might look very different. But the main thing about the product is that it should be an example of the knowledge that students have, and it should provide them a means to meaningfully show you what they have learned. So if the product is not allowing them to meaningfully convey what they've learned to you, then that's not going to be a product that's going to work for your students. So overall, the Tomlinson model, once again, big idea is meet your students' needs, respond to your learners' needs, and provide them with differentiated things within your classroom to meet all of those different needs. And the model, again, works from top to bottom, and you're thinking about responding to learners' needs through the 3 different means of thinking about who they are as learners: learning profile, interest, and readiness. And then in order to provide them with that differentiation, you're looking at content, process, and product. And that's a little bit about the Tomlinson model.